Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios and brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international Wolverine author Mina Molson's The Missing, available on Amazon and paperback and ebook. We're here with a wonderful gentleman who's an author, professor of law at the University of Baltimore's Civic Advocacy Clinic, which law students basically represent low-income clients, also former Maryland legal attorney and a legal aid and children's defense fund attorney, also a scholar and also an advocate and a teacher and on poverty and justice. And he also has a brand new book which basically uncovers these shitty operations turning injustice into revenue and exposes how our juvenile family criminal justice systems thrive on monetizing basically on inequality, which basically to take advantage of struggling youth and adults as well. And how has this changed throughout the years? He's got a book called Injustice Incorporated, How America's Justice System Commodifies Children and the Poor. Live, ladies and gentlemen, from the Plus Studio somewhere in the Baltimore, D.C. area. Author, professor of law at the University of Baltimore's Civil Advocacy Clinic, and also author of the book Injustice Incorporated. Ladies and gentlemen, the multi-talented Daniel Hatcher. Daniel, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, Mike. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Greetings from the East Coast, and thank you so much for having me on the show.
Well, it's great to have you on board, Daniel. So you're author and professor of law at the University of Baltimore Civil Advocacy Clinic, and also you're former Maryland legal aid as well, too, for Children's Defense Fund. You're also a scholar, advocate, and teacher on poverty and injustice. You also have a previous book, which is called The Poverty Industry, the Exploitation of America's Most Valuable Citizens, and also vulnerable, should say. And also you have a new book called Injustice Incorporated, How America's Justice System Commodifies Children and the Poor. And we'll talk about why the legal system is so flawed these days. And it used to be serve and protect. Now it's basically do something and collect. And before getting all that, Daniel, tell us how you first got started.
Well, sure. I've been an advocate and an attorney in a variety of capacities for low-income children and the poor for over 25 years now. And my first experiences were with legal aid in Baltimore, where I was the attorney representing foster youth, children pulled into the highly dysfunctional, broken Baltimore foster care system. And still, those memories, those experiences overwhelmed me then. They still overwhelm me. I have images seared in my mind from that time, and throughout my years of representing low-income clients. But I'm simultaneously inspired by my clients, from their perseverance to struggle through the barrier after barrier of poverty that they're confronted with. So when I started to uncover examples in which, as you describe, institutions that are supposed to serve, right, are instead using our human service agencies, our justice institutions that are supposed to maximize welfare and justice, are instead using their intended beneficiaries, right, to maximize revenue. And it's turning the concept of justice on its head, and is causing immense harm in the process.
And what was that one precise moment for you that simply influenced you into what you're doing?
That's a good question. One precise moment. I mean, there was a moment where I almost dropped out of law school during my first year of law school. I was pretty candidly turned off from the first year of law school, disillusioned, because I went into the law school feeling idealistic and wanting to pursue equal justice. That didn't happen a lot during the first year. So I, however, started volunteering at a local legal aid office. And I was supposed to do intakes over the telephone, right? Simply take down information of low-income individuals who needed assistance. One individual came into the office. He didn't have a phone. He couldn't afford a phone. And he was a laid-off construction worker, laborer. And this guy was probably like twice my size, right? And he comes in, and I'm nervous and reach out to shake his hand, and I'm wearing a makeshift suit. I'm trying to look like a lawyer, and he starts breaking down crying as we're talking. And just the simple feeling of being able to listen, right, and to offer assistance through the simple process of taking down his information. I wasn't even a lawyer yet, but realizing I could use what I was studying to help right? Other individuals. I just felt driven throughout that. And that really was a turning point about why I stayed in law school and kept going.
And what was the most extreme case that you have ever encountered along those lines, like with poverty, injustice, children, and all that? I mean, you don't have to use names or anything like that.
Sure.
Just a general story. What was the most extreme, case you got involved with, and how'd you manage?
Yeah, hard to to think about the most extreme because there's so many different examples, extreme in different ways. But I've had multiple clients die
Mm,
while representing them. A woman that I was representing who was um, trying to appeal denial of medical assistance of Medicaid, and I remember meeting with her at her home, and she was so nervous and scared by ongoing bills and just about everything, like everything that was confronting her. And I was helping her, sitting on her couch, trying to dig through her disorganized piles of bills and papers to try to start making sense for the appeal. And while I was just beginning to investigate the case, I get a call just a couple days later that she killed herself. While we were, in the process of trying to appeal her or Medicaid. And that's just one. I've had multiple clients die in the process of trying to help them obtain Social Security disability benefits. There's a particular former foster youth that's always in my mind who I tried to help simply protect his own resources. This was, I say foster child because he was, at that time while he was a foster child, he entered the system because his mom died.
hmm
And while he's in the system, the foster care system, he's moved around from location to location, probably 10 or more different foster care placements and group homes. So never any consistency in his life, either of the homes or of the people helping him, during that time. But the agency figures out he's eligible for survivor benefits because his mom died. Never told him never told them that they were going to apply for the benefits, never told them that they're going to take over control of the benefits as a representative payee. And then while he's struggling in foster care, right, and trying to figure out his path forward, they took every penny from him, right? And that's a practice that's happening around the country where agencies are taking resources from those they exist to serve. So that's one of the earliest examples of this conflict that I research and write about a lot. That agencies that exist to serve also seek to exist, and they are turning towards using those individuals they're supposed to be serving. And that was one of the examples in the first book that I wrote about the poverty industry, where human service agencies are commodifying children and the poor. In this book, I fear it's even more concerning. Our very systems of justice, our courts, our prosecutors, our probation departments, our policing agencies, right? Our detention facilities are all contractually commodifying children and the poor.
And where do you think at some point in what year, maybe going back a year, decade, or wherever it is, or maybe some period in time or something, that where do you think at that point, maybe some like administration or anything like that, that went from basically protecting the poor, protecting the the what was it? Protecting
The
what?
vulnerable.
The innocent, the less fortunate. I had a little something right there. And when did it get to a point from protecting to using the people for revenue? It's like, what point, maybe like, how far back do you think it's gotten to a point where it's like instead of protecting, becoming using?
It's a good question. And, with different of the mechanisms, some have started a little bit more recently, but some have been going on for centuries, right? Since the founding of our country. One of the examples that I write about that are still being used today, sheriff sales, a way in which, sheriffs are generating revenue largely from the poor, and combined with civil forfeitures, right? And seizing property and selling it off literally on the courthouse steps. That started with the sale of human beings on the
Oh my
courthouse
gosh.
steps when sheriffs were selling enslaved people, right? And sheriffs then were taking their cut. They were taking a commission from the sale of enslaved human beings. Now, still today, when they're pursuing the poor, they're gaining a percentage. So that's been going on for a long time. Some of these other practices started really when some of the major federal funding streams started going to states for an intended purpose. And unfortunately, you have these agencies that found ways to tap into it, not for the intended purpose, right? So one of the examples with juvenile courts actually finding a way to tap in the federal foster care revenue that's supposed to go to foster care agencies, but the courts found a way to tap into that, and Ohio and multiple other states literally generating revenue from child removals. So it's a hard question because each one is a little bit different, but many of them have been happening for a long time.
And what programs are you alluding to the fact that they were intent, but then they take money? You talk about the federal foster program. What are some of the other programs we should be on the lookout for when it comes to supposedly helping, but instead just taking money from the poor? What are some of the other programs that you know of that just simply just take money from the poor? We should be on the lookout for.
Sure. So that particular federal funding stream is called Title 4E. And it's federal funds that are supposed to go again from the federal government to the states. So the foster care agencies are supposed to then have these resources to provide needed assistance. Child support funds, not just the child support payments from individuals, but the federal government also provides federal dollars under what's called Title 4D of the Social Security Act, right? Millions upon millions of dollars that are flowing to the states, again, that are supposed to then help the child support agencies. Those as well, courts, prosecutors, probation departments have found ways to contractually monetize, right, this child support and actually turning it into more of a factory, and focusing on processes that cause harm to low-income families rather than assisting low-income families as it's supposed to happen. Most people don't even realize that much of what we call child support is taken from children. In California, up to 40%, I believe, is actually owed to the government to repay the cost of welfare assistance. The same happens in the Dakotas, every state around the country. Also, they're pursuing families, low-income parents whose children are pulled into the foster care system, right? And they'll pursue them for something called child support, but they're then taking that to repay the cost of foster care. You could have an example just with that, if you think about foster care and child support funds, where you have a juvenile court who's under a contract, literally generating revenue when they adjudicate a child delinquent, remove the child from the home, and then they can generate federal foster care for revenue. The more children removed from their homes, the more revenue the courts can make, literally. And then those same courts are frequently under similar contracts where they'll pursue child support against that low-income parent that they just took the child from, right? And then pull down more federal 4D revenue. And then agencies will take Social Security benefits from children in the care. Foster care agencies will even take veterans assistance benefits from children in foster care who have a parent who died in the military.
Oh, wow. Okay. Veterans assistance. I think that's been a hot topic, but veteran assistance is supposed to help the veterans, but instead they follow the money and just launder to, like, their own interest. The other agencies, which has nothing to do with helping veterans.
That's right. And that form is a form of a survivor benefit, right? Almost like a form of life insurance, and it's supposed to be available for veterans who provide a service to the country and then to their children, right? If the veteran dies. And here you have a child who is already suffering from trauma from being, not getting sufficient services in a broken foster care system. And then they target that child to take their survivor benefit, either from a parent who worked and earned Social Security survivor benefits, or from a parent who literally served in the military and died for the country. The agency will take that children's benefits.
Oh my goodness. That is, well, they say something's got to be done as well, too. And of course, it's all in the book, Injustice Inc., How America's Justice System Commodifies Children and the Poor. We'll also talk about the poverty industry with Daniel Hatchett. But first, listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking a budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. It's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show, get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios, take your image to the next level. Also, time to give official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you'll love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is illusion and those you love will be the first go missing. It's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has garnered great reviews. And Eve 11 adores by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassie, Forrest Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today. For Goes Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Also, check out the Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com. And over 40 podcast platforms, heard in 100 countries, including Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, Anchor FM. Also on Apple Music, iTunes, Google Play, and also on BitChute, Rumble, and follow us on YouTube as well, too. Make sure you subscribe. Take us with you on any mobile device. Also on iHeartRadio, Anchor FM, Odyssey, and more. And for great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com. Check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. T-shirts, pop sockets, throw pillows, tote bags, hoodies. Makes great gifts 24/7. Go to Amazon.com. Check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas like T-shirts, pop sockets, hoodies, phone cases, and more, Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia. Also, check out his great books like Missing, Once, and Wrinkles, and support the Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. We're here with author and professor of law at the University of Baltimore Civil Advocacy Clinic on the Mike Wagner Show, Daniel Hatcher, with his book, Injustice Incorporated, How America's Justice System Commodifies Children and the Poor. And before we talk about that, you wrote your first book, The Poverty Industry, The Exploitation of America's Most Vulnerable Citizens. Tell us about your first book and how'd you first get started?
Sure. So the first book, the Poverty Industry, is really looking at our human service agencies, which, I described a couple examples of our foster care agencies as being one of those, our Medicaid agencies, the agencies that provide social services of all types, right? So they exist, for the purpose, their mission is supposed to be to maximize our welfare, right, of those that they serve. But I started uncovering examples in which, instead of maximizing our welfare, they're seeking to use, right, their beneficiaries to maximize revenue. The one example that we discussed a little bit are where foster care agencies are literally seeking out children in their care who are disabled or have dead parents and taking their resources, taking their survivor and disability benefits. In some states, they'll take more. Maryland, they have passed a regulation to take virtually everything. Nebraska, there's a regulation they'll even take burial plots from
goodness,
if they happen to have them. So everything, finding a way to make revenue. It's almost like the vulnerable populations, the children and poor adults, are like, widgets on a conveyor belt, almost like an assembly line, but sort of in the reverse, right? More of a disassembly line, where they're being, mined for and deconstructed for every possible penny. Medicaid funds are being diverted from intended purposes in the millions. So that first book, in that example that I uncovered about and wrote about for many years now, about foster children's Social Security and veterans assistance benefits that are being taken, that really spurred me into digging into other examples for that first book. That led into that unfortunate theme that I keep uncovering in my research, where those agencies and institutions that are supposed to be serving us are instead finding ways to monetize us, and not just monetize us, monetize harm. Right. Like this example that I write about in the book about Ohio. When you dig into the practices a little more, it's just incredibly striking, and not in a good way, right? Where the courts literally contract to become the local foster care agencies, right? And what that means is, if we pause and think about that, like, we fought a Revolutionary War more than a few years ago, out of concern and to escape tyranny, centralized power in the hands of one entity. At that point, the English crown, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the separation of powers between the branches of government is crucial. It's a crucial part of the structure of American government. Separation between the judicial branch, the legislative branch, and the executive branch. But so here, the juvenile courts in Ohio are literally contracting to become part of the executive branch agency to take on the foster care agency role. And then what they do, they sort of put on their court hat. If they adjudicate a child delinquent, that allows them to put on their contractual foster care agency hat, remove a child from the home, possibly even placing the child in a residential treatment center operated by the court.
Wow.
Right. And then the court puts its court hat back on and rules on its own actions. And if it rules on itself favorably, it can pull down more federal foster care 4E revenue. And this is happening in the millions. And it's not just Ohio. As I uncover in the book, example after example after example across the country, from our biggest cities to our smallest counties and towns, where these monetization practices are occurring.
And of course, the ones that pay for it are as well too are the parents as well too. Irregardless if you have really good parents, bad parents, strict parents, lenient parents, or hardworking parents, disabled parents, any kind of parent, it seems like the rights are getting terminated slowly every day, and the rights of every individual, especially raising families, extended families, and all that, are being deteriorated very quickly.
Right. It's the impact on breaking up families and is just incredibly harmful, and has a vastly disproportionate impact based upon income and based upon race
Wow.
across the country. And when you look at the and then you look at the numbers, and you're right, it hurts the individuals, it hurts the children and the families pulled into it. It hurts all of us, right? Because it is undercutting and undermining and weakening the social fabric. Right. And causing towns and cities and families and communities to be weakened. So it's not just that a foster child in Baltimore is harmed by this practice, right? We're all harmed.
And he also said racism also takes place as well too. It seemed to have escalated a great deal throughout through a decade as well too. So I mean, it's a really difficult subject to talk about, but you think about it, that's also fueled as well.
Yes, and it's hard to do the research in this book. It was difficult. I mean, you start unpacking the numbers. I mean, again, it's every city, every town I look into, the disproportionate impact based upon income and race continues. Stark numbers. And these are in, blue cities and red cities, and blue states and red states, in big cities and small towns, urban and rural, where we're seeing this disproportionate impact, and the extent of the harm, the monetization of the harm, and the way in which each revenue scheme builds upon another, which links to another, which links to another. It really often creates an unescapable cycle of monetized poverty that the low-income individuals are facing.
And do you think, compared to the rest of the world, do you think this problem is extreme with our situation in the world, or is it just common among place with everyone else in the world? Or to them, they think, hey, it's a good idea. Let's copy America and what they're doing, like for our own benefit, like say with Russia, China, Iran, and in some European countries.
It's a good question. I mean, there's definitely poverty around the globe, right? And in many places, much worse than here. But the capitalization of poverty, turning poverty into a business, I feel America is likely leading the way with that. And that's not just happening through partnering with private companies. I have a lot of concern with privatization, and I write about that in my first book, and certainly in this book as well, right? Because I believe in the mission of government. I believe in that mission of maximizing the welfare of the citizenry, right? Of serving and protecting, of our justice institutions, maximizing justice, right? Of our policing agencies are supposed to protect, right? They're not supposed to exist to make a profit, right? And our courts aren't supposed to exist to make a profit, but that's what's happening. So it's not just that in the US that you have this growth of partnership between the government institutions and private actors, right? You have a situation where the government agencies and the justice institutions are becoming like the private actors. They're taking on that for-profit mindset. They're running more like a factory business, seeking to maximize efficiency and revenue rather than what they're supposed to be doing of maximizing welfare and justice.
And of course, we do have a few points to cover as well, too, with Injustice Incorporated, how America's justice system commodifies children and the poor with Daniel Hatcher. And just to wrap up here with Daniel Hatcher, you listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios, and brought to you by our official sponsor, the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. We'll be back with author and professor of law and the author of the book Injustice Incorporated, Daniel Hatcher, after this time. We're back with author and professor of law from DC, Baltimore area, and the author of the book Injustice Incorporated, Daniel Hatcher, here on the Mike Wagner Show. And of course, we talk about the book uncovering shady operations, turning injustice into revenue, and exposing how our juvenile, family, and criminal justice and the systems thrive, and monetizing the inequality, harm to struggle youth and adults. And what are some of the other factors what have we not touched on? It's also important as well, too. And what are some of the trends that could be up and coming to possibly harm the system further, or maybe turn around the system?
Those are great questions. So yeah, like we're just starting to scratch the surface of what I uncover in the book, and the book is just scratching the surface of the extent of the practices that are happening right across our country. So, I mean, as I talk about our courts, similar contractual mechanisms are happening with our prosecutors' offices, with probation departments, and our policing agencies almost have an unending machinations of monetizing the poor, right? Of our detention facilities, whether they be huge for-profit companies, right, or small or private nonprofits, right, or government institutions. Those are all following this sort of business mindset of maximizing bodies in the bed, minimizing cost of care, right? And the result of that is devastating harm to those who are pulled into the system, sometimes worse than harm, often cases leading to death, situations where prosecutors' offices are also monetized towards child removals and monetized towards turning child support into harmful proceedings rather than helpful proceedings. And in terms of some of the other trends that I'm seeing is, over time, we talked about a little bit before, many of these practices come from old histories, right? In terms of the monetization, the commodification practices, but over time and over changes in technology, right, they're becoming more and more and more efficient and interlinked. So the use of artificial intelligence and algorithms is growing as a piece of all these practices. And I fear they're going to speed up the practices even more so. And towards this increased use of privatization, combined with the use of algorithms, it's sort of a dehumanization, right, of services that are supposed to serve the humans. Right. And when that happens, we become, sort of a widget in an equation to make money for the systems, right, rather than a human being to be served.
You talked about the algorithms, AI, and everything else, and also social media as well, too. Of course, you got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and everything else, and some of the up and comings. And I talked to people about this, how much social media has played. It's like, how much social media do you think has played? It's like, how fast, how quickly, and how harmful, or maybe find a way to turn the tide or so.
Right. Well, that's a good point. So the speed of information can cause harm more quickly, right? But it can also spread the word more quickly, right? So one of the most, like what you're doing on the show, in order to have necessary change, we need to increase awareness. So what you're doing cannot be more important, towards that goal. If we're going to have a fix, we need to be working towards the right fix, right? So we need to all be aware. And I hope your listeners share your show, with others, share the information that they learn from that. But through technology, right, through social media, we can share information more rapidly. So we have to keep striving for that. Use the tools that are out there to counteract the bad that's happening from those same tools. So I think that's an excellent point.
And if you're in charge of the system, like to write the system, write the ship, and everything else, what are some of the proper fixes you would recommend?
Well, there's many, but really all the fixes come down to a very simple concepts: mission and ethics, right? We need to make sure those of us who are working in the justice systems, right, have the right mission. And that mission needs to be that pursuit, maximization of equal and impartial justice, right? And then ethics, being ethically true to that mission could not be more important. Ethics is supposed to be the ideal that lifts us flawed humans toward the ideals, right? So we have to be true to ourselves. And I think that means that those of us in the justice systems, even if we're trying our best, right? If I'm a judge, if I'm a police officer, if I'm a probation officer, and I'm trying my individually best to be ethically and constitutionally true, if I'm operating in a flawed system, in a system that's undermined constitutionally and ethically, then my ethics are compromised as well. We have to look beyond ourselves, right, and fix the structures on which we're operating. But again, like the most important part of this fix is awareness. So I think what you're doing, I can't thank you enough.
And great to have in as well too. And lastly, this is very important. How can we help?
That's a great question as well. So again, like one of the things that I think your listeners or we all can do is become informed, become aware, and then share that awareness. Listen to your show, share it with others, make contact with your local elected officials, right? If there's one of these issues that we've talked about that you're particularly interested in, reach out to your county, your city, local officials, your state, local officials, right? And ask them to do something about it, right? Raise it to their attention. I had the privilege of working on a bill in the District of Columbia in DC recently, and it didn't start from me. It came from one individual who had heard about some of my research, reached out to me, and we spoke. And I talked to him about who he could reach out to contact, and he did. He contacted his elected official who introduces a bill called an ordinance in the city, right? And that's been enacted as law. So one person started that process, right? One person can have a huge impact.
And certainly indeed as well too. And where can we find your book, Injustice Incorporated, the poverty industry, and where can we find your works at?
Sure. You can find the books, any of the major online sources, and also at the independent presses, right? And my new book, Injustice Inc., is put out by the University of California Press. And if you Google it and find it on their website, you can also recommend it to your public library, which I think is a great way to increase access. You can find my information if you just Google my name, Daniel Hatcher, at the University of Baltimore. You'll find my contact information and more of what I've written. I've written a lot of other shorter pieces, right, that are available at no cost that are on my website.
We'll certainly check those out. Once again, with author Daniel Hatcher of Injustice Incorporated here on the Mike Wagner Show. Daniel, just a couple of things, and you'll have you back as well too. What else can we expect from you in 2023 and beyond?
That's a good question. Well, I want to work on these issues that I've uncovered in this book to hopefully work with journalists, right, and newscasters, with advocates to try to work towards change, right, to find ways to collaborate with individuals. Hopefully there'll be legislation introduced, so find ways to do that. And I'm thinking forward on my future research, and elder care. The entire elder care industry is something that I've done advocacy on and writing about to an extent, but I'm thinking seriously about digging in more to try to unpack and explain the whole business and how it's causing, again, more harm than help.
And I think that's a really good research topic to uncover as well too. And as soon as you get that done, you're welcome to come back on it as well too. And who do you consider biggest influence in your career, Daniel?
Well, my parents, my mother and father, at a young age, I think just inspired me about the meaning of life. And everything that they both have always done has always been about helping others in one way or another, right? But then countless excellent attorneys that I've worked with, over the years. I'm inspired by amazing civil rights advocates from over the years. There's a former chief judge in Maryland who inspires me to this day, and speeches he would give to my clinic students. I teach a clinic where law students represent low-income clients. And he would inspire with them of the importance of equal justice, right? And he also talked about this simple but crucial concept of an honest mirror of self-reflection. And he based that upon a poem that I really liked called The Guy in the Glass, right? And that really comes back to this point I was making earlier. We have to be true. We have to be true to ourselves. We have to be true to our ethics individually, right? And also to help the systems in which we work do that as well.
That is really interesting. I really like that. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
Yeah, well, if anybody is interested in working on these issues, again, reach out to me, reach out to your elected officials, become informed, be engaged, right? One person can have an impact, right? And one person talking to another, that just doubled the impact, right? So you can have a difference, you can make a difference. And it's just could not be more important for us to keep trying. In these times that we're in, you can feel overwhelmed, you can start to feel jaded and believe that the ideals are not attainable, but we have to keep striving for those ideals, because otherwise the ideals tend to be replaced with their opposites. So we have to keep trying.
That's very true as well, too, and a really good point. Once again, with author Daniel Hatcher of Injustice Incorporated, author and professor of law on the Mike Wagner Show. Daniel, very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Looking forward to having you again soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Love to have you back. And once again, what's your website? How do people contact you? Where can people purchase or check out your works?
Sure, people can find me. I have a faculty website at the University of Baltimore, right? So if you just Google my name and the University of Baltimore, you'll find my faculty website there. I'm on Twitter and Facebook as well. Just Google my name again, or it's at Poverty Law Prof. The current book, Injustice Inc., you can find on the website of the University of California Press. And Mike, I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. I'd love to come back on the show sometime.
And definitely as well, too. Make sure you keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Love having you back. Wish you all the best, Daniel. And Daniel, just want to say you definitely have a great future ahead of you.
Thank you so much.